Can the government force a business to provide abortion for its employees? Can a government force a business to provide morning after pills, which some consider abortion? Is that a woman's right to have its employer or her employer provide that for free? Is that a right we have under our Constitution? Well, the Supreme Court is going to be dealing with that. And before we get to that story, I want to tell you we've got a much happier bit of news. Blue, the famous dog, is going to be here. In popular demand, people will say, we've got to see Blue. So yes. Blue is going to be here doing his Blue things.
We haven't seen him in a while.
I know.
He's been in hiding.
Have pictures of the Blue Mobile, and Blue will be leaping and jumping and showing what a nice dog he is.
Yes, a very happy day indeed.
All right, good to see you.
Yeah, likewise.
Thank you. Well, the news media call it a battle for women's rights, as we said. Others call it a fight for religious liberty. But now the Supreme Court is being called in as a referee.
That's right. Obamacare is on the High Court's docket. At odds, the law requires companies to provide insurance for its employees' birth control, which also includes the morning after pill. But as Paul Strand reports, Christian business owners say that violates their conscience.
The sides are radically divided by this case. One side said at the court business owners shouldn't be allowed to keep their workers from getting any kind of free contraception offered under Obamacare.
What do you want? Birth control! When do you want it?
Always! But others said believers shouldn't lose their religious freedom and be forced to provide contraceptives that kill just because they own a business.
My faith, my freedom, my business.
Demonstrators for and against those businesses gathered by the hundreds as the court heard what some call the most important religious liberty case in a generation. Demonstrators from both sides are out here all revved up in front of the court, but all of a sudden they're going to be thrown into a legal limbo for weeks, maybe months, as the justices go off to consider this case. Hobby Lobby is one of the Christian-owned businesses that brought this case.
The choice the government has forced on us is unfair and not in keeping with the history of our great nation, founded on religious freedom.
Their lead lawyer said under Obamacare, this is their stark choice.
For a company like Hobby Lobby is the option to either pay a $475 million per year fine or to pay a $26 million per year fine or comply with the government's mandate.
But the head of Planned Parenthood said the business owner's beliefs shouldn't trump what Obamacare demands women be given for free.
What's at stake in this issue, in this case, is whether millions of women and their right to preventive care, including birth control, is trumped by a handful of CEOs who have their own personal opinions about birth control.
Access to contraceptive care can make a world of difference. It can help improve the health of our nation, and Lord knows we need to see that happen.
But Father Frank Pavone warned the pro-life movement needs to fear this case if the government wins.
What these business owners are objecting to is the destruction of human life by some of these drugs that the government is saying are preventive services that should be provided in all these health insurance plans. It's about the destruction of life. So as soon as the government says, whether to a business or to a religious group, that you have to allow this, you have to cooperate in this, then that has implications for the entire movement.
Pro-life leader Eric Scheidler saw a pro-choicer holding a sign outside the court that horrified him for its implications.
It was a picture of a Hobby Lobby store saying, "This is not a church." The message was, religion only belongs in church. That's really what is going on here. There is a movement in our country to force religion within the four walls of the church and not allow any kind of public expression of our faith. That's really what's at stake here.
Paul Strand, CBN News, the Supreme Court.
Well, this is what happens, ladies and gentlemen, when an overreaching government decides it's going to take 1/6 of the economy and force people into their mold. Now, of course, if we were in the old Soviet Union, the old communist state, there wouldn't be any question. But so far, this is the land of the free and the home of the brave. But, by the way, we've been saying it here on this program, but a D.C. Circuit Court judge said what we've thought. They called Obamacare, quote, an unmitigated disaster. That's yet another case questioning the president's health care law. John Jessup has more on that story from our CBN News Bureau in Washington.
Pat, the top U.S. Circuit Court is leaning toward not siding with the president on Obamacare. At least 2 judges on the 3-judge panel don't think the government can subsidize insurance premiums on exchanges run by Washington. One judge calls it a disaster, wondering if the law was too poorly written to salvage. The Washington Times reports Judge A. Raymond Randolph also said, "I know there's an absurdity principle, but is there a stupidity principle? If the law is just too stupid, I don't think it's up to the court to save it." The debate happened at the D.C. Circuit Court just blocks away from the Supreme Court. Yet another delay to the health care law. The administration is extending the enrollment deadline for those who started the process before the deadline but can't complete it in time. No word on how long the extension will last. The White House needs to meet its goal of 6 million enrollees in health care exchange markets by March 31st. So far, a little more than 5 million are enrolled. A recent survey shows the healthcare.gov website is slower than most, taking nearly 9 seconds for the homepage to load. In comparison, a leading private health insurance website takes about 5 seconds. Pat?
The question, they aren't revealing, excuse me, I choked. They aren't revealing how many people have actually paid something. These figures are as phony as a $3 bill, so they're doing everything they can to hype this thing to make it look like it's successful. And so far, it is, as that judge said, an unmitigated disaster. John.
Pat, workers digging through the debris of that mudslide in Washington state face a dirty, discouraging job. So far, 16 bodies have been recovered. Searchers say they found even more still trapped in the mud, and over 100 people are still unaccounted for. Meanwhile, as Charlene Aaron reports, crews are fighting continuous rain, which brings the threat of another landslide.
Rescue workers sludged through wet conditions and debris in the search for survivors, using everything from heavy equipment and search dogs to their bare hands. The mud's so thick in some areas, geologists say it's like adding hundreds of pounds on each leg.
They're literally getting stuck, sometimes all the way up to their waist, which means then they need help getting out of that area.
Adding to the misery, a flood warning is in effect, bringing fears of another landslide.
We had a very challenging day today with the rain, and that just further complicated things.
The National Guard and more than 200 search crews continue to comb the area where the landslide consumed an entire community. But officials caution it is extremely unlikely that anyone will be found alive.
We did recover 2 additional fatalities today. That brings our fatality rate to 16. We've located another 8 fatalities. However, we have not recovered those at this time.
They're trying to ping for cell phones for the purposes of essentially locating individuals in the debris.
The mudslide hit Saturday morning, destroying some 35 homes in its path. 45-year-old Chris Jeffords was home with her 4-month-old granddaughter when the wall of mud came crashing in. Her husband, a volunteer firefighter, away with his daughter at the time.
And I started to get text messages from people who had tried to call her, and she wasn't responding, and then it starts to sink in.
Authorities say victims may also include non-residents passing through in their cars on nearby State Highway 530. Meanwhile, members of this close-knit community held a vigil in honor of those lost, while praying for miracles that more survivors can be found. There is evidence the mudslide could have been prevented. A 1999 report warned that the area had the potential for a large catastrophic failure. Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
There are new clues in the search for that missing Malaysian airliner. Satellite images show over 100 objects in the area where the search is taking place. This week, Malaysia's Prime Minister announced the plane went down in a remote part of the Indian Ocean, killing all 239 passengers and crew. Loved ones of those on board are still demanding proof of that claim. 6 different countries continue to search an area covering more than 600,000 square miles, roughly the size of Alaska. The Prime Minister of Australia calls it the most inaccessible spot imaginable. President Obama is trying to minimize Vladimir Putin's power grab in Ukraine. He says Russia is merely a regional power and that Putin is acting out of weakness. Still, Obama said Russia's actions demand a response from international allied powers. Here in the U.S., Democrats in the Senate are now dropping a provision that had held up congressional sanctions against Russia and aid for Ukraine. Meanwhile, Ukraine's defense minister resigned Tuesday as thousands of soldiers withdrew from the Crimean Peninsula, leaving Russian forces in total control. Pat?
Thanks. John, you know, a few years ago, as I was praying, the Lord told me that the old Soviet Union was going to collapse. And that seemed like a far distant dream, but indeed it did collapse. But then he said, then it will be the most dangerous. And I frankly believe, although their forces are weak, they have an incredible array of nuclear weapons. They have nuclear launch vehicles. They have intercontinental ballistic missiles. They have any number of warheads. And they could blow this country right to kingdom come if it so chose. Now, obviously, we don't want to push them to that point. We pushed the Japanese so far in World War II that they were forced to react, and next thing you know, we had a rather unpleasant war. This war would be the war to end civilization. And I don't know if Putin is emotionally stable or not, but most dangerous. And this is an extremely dangerous time. I don't want to back down or anything like this, but we've got to be measured in how we meet this thing, because if we meet it too overtly and we make all kinds of disparaging remarks, we can't insult him. We got to put things in the way. We have to have force. We have to beef up NATO. We have to do all these things. And yes, we can deny them access to the G8, et cetera. But I just want to caution this nation and those dealing with this that we've got somebody who is emotionally and intellectually unstable. He's a megalomaniac. And he has at his disposal an awesome array of life-destroying weapons. John?
Pat, a recent Lifeway research poll shows 54% of Americans think religious liberty is on the decline. One example is playing out in Wisconsin. Governor Scott Walker recently tweeted Philippians 4:13. The verse says, "I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me." The atheist group, the Freedom from Religion Foundation, is demanding Walker remove the post from Twitter and Facebook. They say the governor is using his position to promote Christianity and using his faith to intimidate others, saying, "To say I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me seems more like a threat." Governor Walker has no plans to take the post down. He says the verse was inspiring him that day and he wanted to share it. Well, CBN News wants to know what you think about this story. Connect with us on social media and share your thoughts. And Pat, just on a personal note, that verse has always been one of my favorites.
Well, it just shows how these atheists misinterpret Scripture. Paul is talking about the fact that he's had times that he's had to suffer. I've been abased, and then he said, I know how to abound. I know how to have good times, and I know how to have bad times, and I can do all things, which means I can overcome these trials in life. It is hardly a triumphal statement of I'm going to destroy my enemies. I mean, that whole... But the atheists don't understand the Bible. They don't want to understand the Bible, because if they did, they might get converted. Wendy?
Even so, there's something called free speech and freedom of religion that Governor Walker is entitled to.
Well, of course he is. But I mean, these atheists will holler and yell about anything. We just can't be intimidated by them, because they're a bunch of blowhards, and we cannot allow them to win.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite scriptures as well.
Indiana is the first state to reject the federal Common Core education standards. Governor Mike Pence sees the move as a victory for state authority and hopes others will follow suit. The Republican governor said Indiana has taken a step back, designed our own standards, and done it in a way where we drew on educators, we drew on citizens, we drew on parents, and developed standards that meet the needs of our people. Some critics say all the state did was remove the Common Core label while keeping the same benchmarks. Gunmen opened fire on a church in Kenya last Sunday, killing 3 people and wounding at least 10. It happened outside the coastal city of Mombasa. Officials say 3 attackers entered the Joyland Church during services and began shooting. Nearby, police responded swiftly, but the killers got away. Muslim-Christian tensions are high in Kenya, and many churches and Christian ministers have been attacked in recent years. Kenya borders Somalia, where Christians are being persecuted by the Islamic militant group Al-Shabaab. Well, you can always get the latest from CBN News by going to our website at cbnnews.com.